I'd like to welcome everyone to the June 26th, 2024 Planning Board meeting. We have a big agenda tonight, lots of things to go through. So I'm calling this meeting to order. I'd like to ask Dan if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Yep.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dan. We do have a quorum tonight. I'd like to just review the agenda really briefly. We have 5 items on the agenda in addition to a planner's update. So we're going to be moving through this fairly but as efficiently as we can. I'd like to introduce or have the planning board members introduce themselves, starting with Howard
Mr.
here.
Levitan. I am Howard Levitan, and I live in Oars Island.
I'm Christine Donovan Hall, Oars Island.
Amy Heibel, Harpswell, the Neck.
Matt Gilly, Cundy's Harbor.
Dan Hobeck, Oars Island.
Lori Rice, Great Island.
And I'm Mark Ironman, the town planner.
All right, so the voting members tonight will be Howard, myself, Mr. Holbeck, and Lori, correct? All right.
And you can appoint
You
one
can
more.
appoint
And
one
we
more.
could appoint one more. All right, well, I would appoint Christine
Okay,
or
thank you.
suggest Christine since she's been on the board longer. Okay. The first item on the agenda is actually someone who's been here a number of times, Mr. Donnelly.
Yep.
Would you like to, well, actually, before we hear from you, let's hear from the town planner who's prepared our findings. Mark, do you have anything that you want to say
Yeah,
before?
I just, as you know, there is sort of a pending site plan review for Mr. Donnelly's property at the corner of Harpswell Islands and Mountain Road. The board requested that he get more information before he came back to the board. My understanding is that Drew is in the process of doing that, but he has come to the staff and from us to you for a review, site plan review, because this is a new commercial activity that has never been approved. To have essentially an outdoor tented seasonal sales area at that site using the area that has already been cleared and developed for what was originally proposed to be the circle. The driveway is there, there's a driveway permit for it, and so Drew can tell you what his plans are.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep, just, would you like to give us an overview of your proposal?
Yes,
Thank you.
sure. So I have in the works of getting what I think was a great idea to do the engineered plan and have a great firm that's local that's working with me for the longer-term project. But for the summer, it took a while to find all the engineers in this state are super busy, and so in the interim, I thought maybe it would be nice to give some local entrepreneurs an opportunity to make $1 with maybe a lemonade stand, maybe a blueberry lemonade stand. Please, I would love to see it. Maybe a barbecue pit. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it'll just be me making T-shirts, and I'm, take my design skills and have a little bit of fun, make an offering with that. Out of a tent, no plumbing or electric at this time. Maybe a porta potty, which would be nice, I think, for Might have to put a lock on it because, when people aren't there. And that's basically it, and clean it up, cut it back a little bit so that the parking could fit, and put in some gravel to level it all out for walking on. That's kind of the vision for just like the summer.
Okay. So the proposal is temporary, it's seasonal.
Yeah.
right? It's going to be an outdoor retail site that you're going to use temporarily while you're revising your application for permanent business.
Exactly.
It's going to be about 400 square feet of temporary tents and a 50-square-foot storage shed to allow the retail sale for a variety of goods. The activity will be limited to daylight hours, and a temporary sign will be used. And you're going to essentially use the same site, but without any permanent improvements other than the creation of a walkway between the tents and the parking area. Is that correct?
That's pretty much,
Okay,
yeah.
super. All right.
Madam Chairman, should we deal with the waiver issue first?
Well, we can deal with the waiver issue.
Before we
I
get into the
wanted to see
substance.
if there were any members of the public that had anything that they wanted to say, and then we'd move on with the board review. So are there any members of the public that would like to say anything? Okay, all right. We'll move on to the planning board review. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. So I'm going to read a little bit here just because it's kind of, it's trying to hear these things read all the time, but in order to be transparent, I want to make sure that everyone is hearing the same thing. So staff has reviewed this submission requirement based on a checklist that we use, and the staff recommends that the planning board grant the requested waivers. And before we vote to do that, we're going to talk about those requested waivers. So Howard, would you like to lead off on that discussion?
Well, I think a lot of the issues of the waivers are basically that were materials given to us in the original filing that we've seen 3 times. And it didn't make a lot of sense to require them to be refiled again with this sort of seasonal, temporary, 1-year type proposal. So staff has recommended that we waive the list of things that are in the submission checklist. And I think it's probably the right thing to do.
All right. So, let's see, do we want to list those waivers out? Mark, do you recommend that we list the waivers or just,
I think you can just reference them in the application.
Okay.
I mean, there's quite a list of them, and I think they're spelled out in both the application itself and in the checklist. So
Yeah, the
Okay.
checklist is pretty
I
comprehensive.
Okay.
think we have the documentation of what they are.
all right, good to go. Does anybody want to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so moved. Any discussion? Okay, second? Thank you. Any discussion?
I just have a quick question. I know the DOT's approved the road between 24 and Mountain Road. How about the traffic within your property? As cars come in and leave, is there going to be any directions to keep them going in one direction so they circle out and not get in each other's way? Just a little bit,
I could put up a little, arrow right at the rocks, the ledges in the middle. I'm gonna take out a little bit of it. Some of it I plan on leaving. I'm with a sledgehammer. It's just this, this much that you will give me 6 more feet if I just take out this little.
okay.
But I don't think we need to take the other. By the way, Howard, in the last meeting, I watched this over and over again, the video of us, and I have taken it to heart, and I'm not going to do a drive-through. I think everybody would be delighted to know this. And so keeping it simple for the next version, for the next round.
So how do they get in and out then?
Well, it's just going to be that loop, the way.
The loop.
Yep, just the loop. And I could put up a little sign that definitely makes it easier.
Yeah, people need sometimes a little guidance.
An arrow, yeah, because I can see what you're saying, going the wrong way, that would cause a traffic jam.
Yeah, and that's my only concern.
Yep, no problem, easy to do.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? All right, we have a motion on board that grants the waivers of the submission requirements as set out in the application, and that the application of Andrew Donnelly therefore meets the submission requirements and is in order for consideration by the board. We have made a motion, it's been seconded, so I'd like to ask for a vote. All in favor? Okay, thank you. All in favor. Now we move on to conformance with approval standards. Once again, Mark, do I have to go through all of these, or no?
Here's my answer.
Yes.
The board, the applicant, and presumably on the back table were the findings of the application's conformance with the site plan review approval standards. I think, given that you have the written record, that there is a proposed finding for each of the standards. I don't think you need to go through them one by one. This is set up so that there's a single motion to approve them. And I would say that unless members of the board want to talk about a specific standard or the findings relative to a specific standard, that I think you can just consider the package. This is the paralegal counsel's suggestion in previous.
Thank you.
He's looking at me.
Okay,
Since he tells me he's no longer a lawyer or something like that in Maine.
all right.
However, some of us still are.
Right.
Thank you. So with regard to Mark's mentioning that somebody might have an issue or a question with regard to anything that's in these findings, is there anybody? Yes?
I have a
Howard.
couple of questions.
Okay.
And more, I want to sort of talk a little bit about, step back a little. I realize this is only a temporary use. You have it scheduled for a year. I'm just struggling with the tent issue in Harpswell. And I was looking in the ordinances to see if I could find other examples of temporary, more seasonal uses, and there are some. I was a little surprised to see it. Like, for example, I found that we limit yard sales to no more than 3 consecutive days, of which no more than 2 in a year. We limit the amount of time you can have a tent and live in it on a lot or an RV to 120 days, and they require a septic system. And it's not just the shoreline zone, it's incorporated into the basic land use ordinance as well. We regulate mobile food handlers separately. And we also limit temporary party tents to 3 days of use before they have to come down. Otherwise, I think the alternative is, especially if they're commercial use, they have to come to us. And the standards that we have, the criteria, are minimum standards. So we have every right to ask for higher standards if we have a problem with things. And I guess I would like to have a short discussion about tents in Harpswell for commercial purposes. So, because I can envision a fair amount of people coming to wanting to do a site plan review, and this would be a precedent for that. And it's somewhat troubling to me. I don't know if this is something that we've even thought about. on an ongoing basis. On the other hand, you know, I understand Mr. Donnelly's concern. He's been here, this is the fourth time, and we haven't been able to help him as much as we probably could. Not because of us, but because we really do need to see if we're going to do a full site plan review of a commercial operation that doesn't have an end in sight, then it's complicated, and it's something that we have to take with utmost care. So my suggestion is that there are a couple of things that I would sort of add to the, if the board's of a mind to allow this particular instance to it, I'd like it to be really clear that it is a temporary thing. We've already got that it's no more than a year. I'd like to bring in that 120-day provision and actually have some specific dates of operation, so that, say, for example, it can start on July 1st and end on October 31st. I think that's 120 days. And it would automatically, the approval would automatically terminate at the end of that period of time, and it's not renewable, except by another application, which anybody has the right to do. And I think you have to make it subject to compliance with all the state laws. So for example, if you're gonna have a barbecue pit and a lemonade stand, I don't know about the lemonade stand, but a barbecue pit, you gotta go to the health department and get a license.
Yep.
For any food, I would assume.
And I'm going to invite other folk, I'm not going to be the pit master, I watch it on TV, that's about it. But I'll try to attract somebody that will have to get those permits.
Well, I guess what I would say is that we would put a provision in that
Okay.
would say that anybody who is operating would have to have all the required state and local licenses
And
to.
Yeah, and
Item 4
Howard,
does say
the
that.
condition of approval, number 4, says that.
Yeah.
Well, good.
It
does.
says you have to have all necessary state and federal approvals.
Yeah, but I was wondering about is there a local approval for health?
I think if
Food
they
service?
serve, I don't know about Vittler's license. Does
I thought there was a
Harpswell-
victualer's license.
Huh?
Victualer's license.
No, it's Vittler's.
Vittlers?
license.
Okay.
Look it up.
I don't know. No, I'm okay with it, but as long as we add the word local to that,
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
all right.
And then if someone was interested in a food truck, was interested, do
Have
I?
to go to the
Selectmen,
selectmen,
select board.
Okay,
and you can't have seats unless you come back
Yeah,
here.
that's correct.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other question?
Yeah, I think Howard's points are very well taken. One of the unique things is that Mr. Donnelly has been here a number of times, and we've already seen what his overall plans for, which really, in my opinion, militate in favor of this. The concern that I would have would be for somebody who wanted to put up a tent, fireworks stand.
Yeah.
Can't sell fireworks in Harpswell.
No, but
Anyway.
that's a
another
separate
order.
issue, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's that same kind of
kind
temporary,
of thing.
seasonal, or a Halloween shop or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with Howard that it's something that we really do have to keep an eye on in the future.
I have a question. Item 6 says that the approval is for temporary use of the site for not more than 1 year. Howard, you've suggested 160 days.
120.
120 days. What does the board think about that?
I actually agree.
120 days? Okay.
Yeah, I'm writing an amendment to that.
Yeah,
It says
that would be good.
that it would be, this approval is for temporary of the site for this purpose from July 1st to October 31st of 2024.
Yeah.
And is not renewable.
Yeah.
We okay with that?
Yeah, that would make me.
And then up
more
under 4, I put in, the applicant shall obtain all necessary local, state and federal approvals.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. at this point, what I would like to do is make a motion to approve this application based on these 6 conditions of approval.
We should do the findings of fact, incorporate the findings of fact.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I will be doing that.
Yeah.
So based on these findings that are dated 6/26/24, that are for item 23-02-01, that are made part of this action, I move that the planning board approves the application of Andrew Donnelly for the temporary seasonal use of Lot 48 on tax map 40 as an outdoor retail site, subject to the following conditions of approval. Number 1, this approval is not final until such time as final plans showing all conditions of approval and any waivers granted have been signed by the chair of the planning board. Number 2, this approval is based on the approved plans and on all submissions and information provided by the applicant at final approval, whether referenced in any findings or conditions of approval. Number 3, this approval is dependent upon and limited to the proposal and plans contained in the application and supporting documents submitted and affirmed to by the applicant. Any variation from the plans, proposals, and supporting documents, except de minimis changes as determined by the town planner, that do not affect approval standards is subject to the review and approval of the planning board prior to implementation. Number 4, the applicant shall obtain all necessary local, state, and federal approvals before the applicant commences with any land use activity pursuant to this site plan approval, and shall comply with the requirements of those permits and approvals. And furthermore, that any tenant or leasee or vendor that uses the property must also obtain all necessary local, state, and federal approvals before that individual commences any land use activity pursuant to this site plan approval, and shall comply with the requirements of those permits and approvals, and it shall be the responsibility of this applicant to ensure that those approvals are met. Number 5, all work shall be completed in accordance with best management practices for soil erosion and sedimentation control. Number 6, this approval is for the temporary use of the site for this purpose and not for more than 120 days, specifically July 1st through October 31st, 2024, from the date of this approval, and this approval is not renewable. Any second to my motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? I added something to this. Did you all
Yeah,
get it? You
that's
all-
appropriate.
Okay. All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Excellent. All right, go forth and
All right.
prosper.
Yeah, let's see what I can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right, number 2. The rest of these applications before us involve things that the planning board sees more and more frequently, which is an application to enlarge or otherwise change a non-conforming use in the shoreline. And these applications are really difficult for the planning board for a variety of reasons, because they require some judgment on the part of the planning board and the codes office with regard to what the applicant really can and cannot do. And this is an example of that. I'm going to ask the planner, this is item number 2, or item number 240601, Steve Potvin and Patricia Reed, 1949 Harpswell Island Road, map 25, lot 153. It's for reconstruction of a non-conforming structure. I'd like to ask the town planner if he would introduce this application to us. give us any feedback?
Members of the board, members of the public, this is actually before the planning board first to see if you want to take jurisdiction for the review of the application for its conformance with the setback requirements, or whether you want to leave that review with the code enforcement office. This is an application to replace an existing cottage with a new structure. Again, seasonal structure. You received tonight a revised plan with a date on it of June 25th. The proposal is to essentially replace the same amount of square footage. The current building, if you look at the plan, essentially is at a seawall, and the proposal is to move it back 5 feet. The original plan, which the applicant's representative said was incorrectly drawn, showed that replacement structure being slid to the south toward the, I would call it the return on the seawall that comes back along the side of the property. The plan has been revised to essentially just slide the property, the proposed building, back further from the shore. And you'll notice on the revised plan, it indicates both the location where the toe of the slope is, behind where the house is proposed to be, as well as the location of the sewage disposal system. So the comments I sent you are really not relevant to the revised plan. The question is, can this be home, can this cottage be reconstructed so that it's more conforming to the setback requirements? And the proposed reconstruction makes it more conforming by 5 feet with the shoreline setback, and it maintains essentially the same property line setbacks as exist. And the question before you is, do you want to take jurisdiction for the review of the application, or do you want to remand it to the code enforcement office based on the revised plan?
Okay. We made a site visit to this property, and it is a tight property. It's very, very tight. During the storm, the last storm, the overboard discharge system was literally exposed in the stone bed that it was situated in. I'm just thinking about how to proceed here, because this is new information, and that's fine. Let's just continue on with this as we would have, and then come up with ask any questions we have and come up with a decision. So the applicant wants to remove a non-conforming cottage and construct a new non-conforming cottage in its place. The structure is non-conforming with respect to the 75-foot shoreline setback on both the east and the south sides of the seawall that wrap around the property. Originally, they wanted to reconstruct the home in essentially the same location. Now they're moving it 5 feet back.
That's correct.
5 feet back. so from the easterly retaining wall, but it will still encroach into the existing setback on the southern section of the retaining wall. And therefore, the reconstruction will be less nonconforming with respect to the 75-foot setback. And will it still be more nonconforming on the south side, Mark?
No, that's incorrect.
Okay.
The revised plan, if you compare the plan that was in the original application and with the plan that you got tonight, you will notice that in the original plan, the 30 by 30 foot structure was shifted toward the, I'm going to call it south, toward the return on the seawall,
Yeah,
making it more non-conforming because that's a shoreland setback there. The revised plan now eliminates that, take that away. The revised plan that you got tonight, dated 6/25, shows that the replacement structure will simply, I'm going to call it, slide back from where the existing footprint is. It will be moved back 5 foot from the retaining wall, and it will maintain the same distance from the seawall, retaining wall on the south side and the property lines. And as you can see on the revised plan, the proposal is to put a septic system to replace the former overboard discharge system
Yeah.
on the
I'm
west.
looking at it, Mark, and I think I'm not going to speak for the rest of the board, but I'm finding it a little difficult since there are no dimensions, there are no setback dimensions on the 625 plan. And I can't, I mean, I could sort of see, but there's different information on both plans. So one plan has the septic system and one plan doesn't. One plan, I mean, it's hard to tell if it's the same scale. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult to understand. So would you just go through what you think what the new setbacks are?
Well,
Maybe.
the current setback on the east side is essentially 0.
On the east side, is that the retaining wall side?
That's the retaining wall side along the ocean. Currently, the current property
Okay,
goes right
gotcha.
there.
That's-
And it will be moved back 5 feet.
So, yeah,
On the two sidelines, the proposed house will maintain the existing setbacks. Don't look at that plan, look at the, oh,
I
you
know,
can, all
I'm
right.
comparing.
Yeah, it simply slides back and maintains the existing sideline setbacks.
okay,
And the question I would say before the town is, could it be moved back further than 5 feet?
okay,
And if you look at the plan, it indicates that 7 feet beyond the proposed back wall, or the, let's call it the street wall or whatever, the wall away from the ocean, that 7 feet behind there, it starts to go uphill. And the proposal is that 24 feet, I think that's 17, could be 19, no, 17,
17.
24 feet behind the back wall is where the proposed septic system would be located. And Margaret, as the local plumbing inspector, can tell you that there are separation distances between the location of the elements of the septic system and the building. the property lines, and also relationship to existing wells. So, you know, in a sense, I would suggest to you moving it back and meeting the new floodplain requirements is probably the best option that exists for reconstructing what is essentially there that was damaged in the storms.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Let's hear from the applicant. Oh, then we'll hear from the planning board. Let's hear from the applicant, please.
Hello.
Steve Bottman, I'm going to be the builder.
Okay.
So the first application that you saw, the first drawing was a mistake by the engineer.
I see.
That's incorrect. Both structures are 30 feet, and you can see one clearly is bigger than the other. 30 feet is 30 feet. It's just a mistake in print. So I had it rectified because there was some request to meet the new floodplain. So we just updated that. So the building's going to be essentially exactly where it is, just moving back 5 feet away from the water.
Got it.
No closer to any of the sidelines
Okay.
and not encroaching too much to the septic system.
Okay, thank you. Planning board have any questions?
Just a
Howard.
couple of questions.
Yes, Howard.
The current system was overboard discharge.
Yep.
So we're going from overboard discharge to an engineered septic system like
Fuji.
a Fuji stand.
Yep.
Okay. So which requires a minimal leach field somewhere on there, and there's enough land
Yep.
to do that without a waiver from the state or anything?
Right.
Okay, and how high up are you building up the piers?
The piers?
Yeah.
It's going to be a total of 17 feet, right?
That's to your ridge,
To your ridge.
but I thought he just hit.
How much off of the ground level?
The pier itself,
Bringing the house up
it's going to come up
5 feet?
7 feet, sorry.
7 feet, okay. So we're getting a structure that is much more sustainable
Yes, for
and
sure.
gets rid of the overboard discharge. And the house is in pretty tough shape right now. So I think overall, with the addition of the engineered septic system, which is really, the effluent from those systems before the leach field is potable. So, I mean, these are pretty incredible systems, so.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Anybody else? I did have a question regarding the septic system. It was somewhere mentioned that the applicant had the opportunity to connect to the condo septic system.
That didn't work out.
Okay, okay, all right, super. Okay, all right, so thank you very much, sir. The question is whether or not we want to take jurisdiction of this application with regard to section 10.3.2.4 of the Shoreland zoning ordinance. I'm going to make a motion, and then we can talk about it. I'd like to move that the planning board remand the application of Patricia Reed to reconstruct a non-conforming structure on Lot 153 on map 25 that will continue to be non-conforming with respect to the required shoreline setback to the code enforcement officer for processing, with the understanding that the plan will be redesigned to reduce the shoreline setback nonconformity. If the proposed reconstruction deviates substantially from this proposal, the town planner shall require that the revised proposal be re-reviewed by the planning board to determine if the board wants to take jurisdiction for the review of the application. Is there a second?
I'd like to second it, but I think we ought to amend it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
To reflect the fact that they've already revised the plan and that it is
Yeah.
less, it is less non-conforming than it was previously. In
Yeah.
other words, it's now
You
5
think
feet
so?
less.
Okay. I figured it was,
Howard, I'm editing.
Okay.
If you look at the motion, would you be comfortable with saying that simply on map 25 that will continue to be non-conforming with respect to the required shoreland setback, period?
Yeah, that's,
Oh, I'm sorry, to the code enforcement officer for processing, period.
period.
And strike out with the understanding that the plan will be redesigned to reduce the non-conformity.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
I think that
Gotcha.
captures what I was trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Okay?
Okay. I make that motion with that amendment. And do we have a second? Okay.
For him.
No, but-
We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Wow, this is moving along swimmingly.
Don't jinx this.
Oh, that was wrong.
Exactly.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good luck with that. So. All right.
That's most of the people, I think, are leaving now.
I'd just like to put a place mark in while everybody's clearing out. Margaret got some really interesting information about the hat. Remember, we've been struggling with the issue of
Yeah.
whether or not the January storms had an impact on hat.
Yeah.
Margaret wrote an email through Sue Brown, I think, to the state hydrologist, geologist, whatever. And he answered us. It's a little Greek, but I think I understand it. And I'd like to talk about it in relationship to some of these
Okay.
issues.
Put it on at the end of the
At
meeting?
some point. Well, I think it may come up before that, depending
Okay.
on what we do on some of the other applications.
Okay, all right, super. All right, let's begin. Item number 3, this is 240602, David Trewergy, 120 Littlefield Road, map 9, lot 41. This is another reconstruction of a non-conforming structure in the shoreland zone. And this one, we did a site review for this one, which seemed fairly simple at the time that we did the site review. It has since gotten a little bit more complicated. The applicant is seeking permission to remove a non-conforming shed and construct a new non-conforming shed in its place. I've already mentioned the location. It's in the shoreline residential district, and the existing shed is 53 feet from the high water line, and therefore non-conforming with regard to the 75-foot setback that's required in the shoreline. The shed is conforming to the property line setback with the road and the northerly and southerly property lines. The applicant proposes to reconstruct the shed in essentially the same location as the existing shed, and it will therefore be nonconforming. The applicant acknowledges that there is a location on the lot where the replacement shed could be located that conforms to all the setback requirements, but that locating the shed in that area would be intrusive in terms of the view of its neighbors and possibly require the removal of mature trees. And on the site walk, we saw exactly what the applicant was talking about there. Mark, would you like to add anything to that?
I mean, this is one of those situations where the rules don't make any sense, but I am responsible to tell you what the rules say. The rules say that you cannot reconstruct a non-conforming structure if there is a location on the lot that meets the setback requirements. For better or for worse, the applicant in his application said, yes, there is such a location, and in fact, there's a place on the lot where you could rebuild the shed that meets the setback requirements. The board has previously chastised me for not calling this to your attention. And so this is a case where I'm going to leave it to your devices because my professional responsibility is to tell you that the ordinance prohibits them from reconstructing the shed so that it's non-conforming when it could be located to be conforming.
Thank you, Mark. Let's hear from the applicant.
I'm Naomi Trudy, not David Trudy. He is my brother-in-law. Him and my husband own this little cottage. Their family bought it in the 80s. He has a debilitating hearing problem, so he's actually waiting eagerly in the parking lot, so I'm representing them. I live on Great Island. It is my year-round home. We're talking about building, well, there is currently behind the cottage a shed. It is pretty small. I mean, you guys have the specs. It's like, we're not talking about anything big.
Right.
It's about this big. It is kind of falling down. I mean, you saw it on the site visit. And we have just, I'd say, like 3 objectives. First and foremost, we want to not have this, it's a woodshed, like a little woodshed, dilapidated little woodshed there. We want to, rebuild it in wood and paint it the same colors that the cottage. We want to be able to store some of the little recycling bins and stuff outside because the cottage is super small. We don't want that stuff laying around. So aesthetics are important. Right now where it's located, you can't see it from the water. You can't see it on the road or from the neighbors. It's really discreet. And we want to keep the character there of Harpswell, and that's really first and foremost. This is one of our favorite places, and we don't want to disturb the landscape. That's also really important to us. So, yes, there is a technicality that there is a location, for better or for worse, Mark, where we could relocate it. You're going to be able to see it all the time. There's a beautiful oak tree there. If we did that, I think it would compromise that oak tree. There's some, lindens there, but we just don't want to, we want to be the least disruptive as possible and widen it by a foot, I think, about on one side, and 1.5 feet. It's 1-story shed. It's nothing big. And that's really all we want to do. And we don't want to be disruptive with it. We don't want to break the rules either. But it would be a real shame to have to relocate it and rebuild it somewhere that isn't going to preserve the landscape or the character of that location. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Section 10.3.24 of the Shoreland Zoning Ordinance gives the planning board the right to be given the opportunity to exercise jurisdiction over an application like this for a non-conforming structure. So tonight, our decision is to decide whether or not, or our task is to decide whether or not we want to take jurisdiction of this or remand it to the Codes Enforcement Office. This is, for me, a tricky one because some of the other applications that we have in front of us tonight require some similarly difficult thought processes to work out. So I'd like to open it up to the planning board for discussion here and see if anybody's got any brilliant thoughts. Matt?
Yeah, I was at the site walk, and I saw it is a small shed, and I guess I'm torn because it is breaking the rules, and this would set precedent going forth if we allowed you to break the rules. And the other issue is this isn't a necessity per se. So if we break the rules for something that's not necessary or needed, like it's not an actual living structure, it's a storage structure, then we have to break the rules again for a living structure. I'm just afraid of the precedent that this sets if we approve it.
Thank you, Matt. I concur. I think that was extremely well stated and appreciate that. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Can we hear from codes, is that the only possible place that it can be relocated without, and made not conforming?
I don't.
I mean, what if you tucked it in behind the house? Or on the, so it doesn't show up? It's still gonna be seen somewhere, but.
I don't know exactly where on the lot is conforming.
I can tell you.
Will you
So
show me? Here.
Behind the
Go to
cottage. Yeah, it's gonna be within the 75 feet, so it can't be behind the cottage. It has to be, okay, so this is the neighbors, this is the road right here. Everything behind the cottage, right, so from here where the little shed is here, that's just non-conforming because it's within the 75 feet. So it would have to be right up here, and this is like a little pathway to get behind the house with the trees here, and then the neighbors here, and then the road, and, you know, the neighbors across from here. So it has to essentially be kind of like almost in front of the house. That's the only conforming place that's distant enough from the neighbor and from within the 75. But like we did a pretty thorough job to try to figure out where else it could be.
Okay.
So that's where it would have to be.
Okay.
I have a
Dan.
question. Is it permissible to put a shed in front of the house closer to the road? Or does that violate something else?
I don't think there's room for the shed and the 25-foot setback between the house and the road.
So it has to be on the side then?
Yeah, on the north side.
Okay.
It may be more expensive, it would be more expensive, certainly, to build a structure that doesn't detract from the house, that adds to the, that, you know, that sort of takes its architecture from the house, and that perhaps doesn't look just like a shed, but looks a little bit more attractive.
Yeah, I
Is it-
think we could do that. It's more about the trees and the oak tree and disturbing the land there. I mean, we would build it no matter, you know, it's not really about putting a junky shed there.
Yeah.
It's just disturbing the landscape, number one. And then number two, just what will any kind of beautiful shed will look like right there.
Yeah.
Will it be on a
Something about sightlines, neighbor sightlines? I thought I heard something.
Yeah,
You have to come up to the,
yeah.
I just thought I had heard in the previous discussion, there was a comment about whether there was going to be an issue with neighbor sightlines in this other position, and I haven't heard that discussed at all.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
are there any abutters here that?
I'm not about
Are there any abutters
Madam
here?
Chairman,
Yes, I know. Yeah.
at the risk of moving this along, I think if the planning board's guidance, because that's really what this is that the reconstruction of the shed needs to fully conform to the setback requirements if it's able to, then I think playing the what-if game here is not a good use of time because we don't have the accurate information and what have you. I'd suggest that you remand it to codes with guidance to work with the applicant to try and find a location that conforms to the setbacks and meets the property owner's objectives to the maximum extent. And I say that because if you look at the numbers, from the shoreline where it's 31 is there, and you look at, you add the two offsets together, the 31 and the 93 feet is 124 feet. You have to have 75-foot setback from the water and a 25-foot setback from the road. So, you know, you got like a 24-foot wide sliver going through there along the property where you can locate it. And that gets even narrower when you get down to where the, you know, the inset is. So there's a very, very small area that you can meet the property line setback, the road setback, and the shoreline setback. But that really requires, you know, sort of laying it out and
Okay.
talking to the property owner about where you could do it.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion, unless there's further discussion that, okay. So I'm going to move that we deny this application.
Ma'am?
No.
No, you can't deny it until you decide whether
okay.
you're going to take
We were-
Oh,
jurisdiction.
that is right, that is correct.
Yeah.
Given the ability of the applicant to relocate it. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move that we remand this application to the codes office. And that we ask the property owner to work with the codes office to meet the required setbacks in a manner that meets the property owner's objectives and conforms to the setback requirements.
Second.
Any further discussion? Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you.
Quick question for you. Are you planning a pad, or is it going to be up like on blocks?
Right now, it's on existing like little cement foundation that it wouldn't have moved off of, like the foundation's actually big enough for the expansion.
Okay.
So, we were just gonna build it on top of that existing surface.
Okay. Curious.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. It's a
Yeah,
really
thank you.
tough one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your efforts.
Okay.
All right, we're now moving on to item number 4. This is an application from Blue Water Design for Carl and Stephanie Nicholas, who are the owners of 84 Abner Point Road. The applicant seeks to reconstruct a non-conforming structure. I'm going to ask Mark to introduce this application to the board.
You've got small plans with the application. Are you representing the applicant who's got larger scale plans that maybe you can read some of this? But the proposal, as is presented in the application, is essentially to rebuild the, I guess you'd call it the house portion of what's there on the existing foundation, to keep the existing garage wing that goes away right angles to the shoreline, and to add a addition that runs, I guess you'd call it parallel to the shoreline, but back behind the major house structure. And this is a non-conforming structure. It does not meet the shoreline setback requirement. And so this is before the board, like the other items tonight, to, for you to consider whether you want to take jurisdiction for the review of the application as to whether it conforms to the setbacks to the greatest practical extent as called for in the ordinance. And in your notes, the factors that you are, or the town is supposed to consider are laid out with the existing additional consideration of the existing foundation and the reuse of the existing foundation. And I think my interpretation is that, if you've got a good foundation that you're going to use, that's a consideration. If you're going to rip it out or have to rebuild it, then maybe it's not a consideration on terms of the location of the structure. So that's really the issue before you. At first level is, do you want to take jurisdiction for the review?
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so the question, as Mark said, is whether we want to take jurisdiction for the review. How many folks did the site? You didn't go?
I was there.
Yes,
I
I'm
was at the
sorry that I
sidewalk.
can't remember. Okay. Did you?
Matt was there.
I know
Yeah,
you were
Matt was
there.
there.
Dan, did you go?
I
No.
don't think we
Okay.
did, no.
Okay, I think it was really important to be on the site walk for this one. Just to see what the applicant was, what we're dealing with here.
Can I ask Mark a question before? we
Yes,
get
please,
going on this?
please.
On the foundation question, I just want to make certain that I'm reading the statute correctly. It is not determinative, it's just one of the criteria.
That's correct, and I think there's other language in the ordinance, and that's what I said. I mean, it's my professional judgment as to whether this is a usable improvement, or, if it's a foundation that you gotta rip 80% of it out and replace it. I think it is intended in shoreland zoning to reflect, is there a valuable asset that's there that could be used? Then you should consider it. If it's a foundation that needs to be rebuilt and
We
reconstructed,
don't consider it. We
it's
don't
not
need
a consideration. It really comes down to that question of to me, sort of the balancing. If you look at the criteria that are there, the slope of the land, the shape of the land, septic considerations, this says that the foundation should also potentially be a consideration, but I think it's got to be a real legitimate foundation.
If we said that, in looking at that, how much would we need to bring it back away from the shoreline? I don't see that calculation.
About 10 feet, isn't
To make it conforming, the front of the house. I realize that
Yeah.
pool is not being touched, so that
it? This is right here.
Yeah, and if you
way
look
to the
at
front of it and the
if you
decking.
look at the floor plans, and I'm sorry, Jeff, I think Jeff may have plans that show it. On the floor plans, there is in fact a line that goes sort of diagonally through the floor plan on each floor level. I'm looking at A3, and you can see it as a thin red line. Same thing on A4, and so
Which is the,
and I remember, this is really,
How about a ballpark?
well, I would describe it
5
as a wedge. The amount of structure that encroaches on the
I
75-foot
see that.
setback,
I
as
see that.
I interpret the plan, is a wedge that goes from about 1.5 feet at one end to, I think it's about 14 feet at the other end.
That's about right.
Well, the other end.
Jeff, go to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Yes, let's hear from the applicant, and then the board can ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 1.5 feet on the southerly end, and then it goes diagonally across the house does step in 4 feet on the northwest corner. So the actual corner of the house at that point is 10 feet within the
But there
shoreline
is a
zone.
deck beyond that that encroaches
There
into
is.
the setback.
There is. There's actually 8 feet of deck there now. At the site visit, Amy had suggested cutting that deck back to help lose some of the nonconformance, and we did that. We took 4 feet of that off. And I don't know if you have that submittal, but I did submit that change to the codes office.
I see that, this is the June 11th revision.
And I do have a large copy of that if you'd like that.
Thank you, Jeff.
So here's what I've been sort of struggling with, is the issue of determining greatest practical extent. And if it is solely a question of money with respect to the foundation, and we don't have the information as to whether or not it is feasible to rebuild the front of the foundation, move the back end up, maybe it's not feasible. We don't know exactly what that would do behind the house. There seems to be enough land to do that. And we don't know exactly where the septic system is and the leach field.
Oh, we do.
Well, no, I'm sure
Oh,
you
okay.
do, but I'm saying, well, we don't know, and it was not evident on the ground. So the issue is, I guess you have two choices. One is, and Mark, jump in if I'm wrong, but I mean, we could ask for that information and table this.
Yeah, that's what Mark has suggested.
I
in
thought
the
he was
findings.
suggesting remanding.
No, he doesn't. He's suggesting that we table.
Table? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and I mean, Jeff, do you have sheet A9?
I do.
And it's too bad we can't show it on larger scale. But sheet A9 shows the existing plot plan, and it's really
I see it.
kind of in sketch. The top one shows the pool, the existing house, and in, at least on my version, in dotted red lines, it shows the 25-foot property line setbacks and the 75-foot shoreline setback. You will see that the 75-foot shoreline line setback goes through the pool, so that about 2/3, 3/4 of the pool and pool deck encroaches into the 75-foot setback. And then you can see the diagonal line and the wedge that's created of the existing house that encroaches into the 75-foot setback.
It's hard to read this plan because it looks like
Yeah.
the proposed new plot plan is actually more
Yes,
non-conforming.
that's what I see here, too.
Yeah,
In what respect, Amy?
because it looks like the front of the house toward that faces the shore is actually larger. There's a larger portion of built area in the proposed plot plan than in the existing plot plan.
Well, it's
I'm looking at page A9 here.
It's a direct overlay. It's the main body of the house is a direct overlay. It's using every square inch of that existing foundation with no addition to the front of
So
it.
is it deck area that makes it look like it's larger? 'Cause it,
If you look at the front wall of the building, on the existing plot plan, there is, I'm going to call it a notch in that corner. And in the proposed plot plan, that notch disappears.
The notch is still there, but what I did was shade the area of the deck that was going to be removed. But if you look on and you can go back to the
Right.
floor plans on each floor, that notch is still exactly where it is currently.
Right, so that's where the confusion is.
Yeah.
If you go to A2, which is the foundation plan, which was the first one in Mayan, you can see that notch.
And it continues all the way up.
And it's carried up, but there is that deck. If you look at the first floor plan on A4, that fills in that notch and extends out.
Right.
However, and this is where we get into Margaret's jurisdiction, is it really, if you look at A4 and you look at the area called, well, I'm not sure, I'm not sure I've got an existing plan in here, existing floor plan. But the nonconformity is based on the closest point of the structure to the water.
If I recall too, during the site walk, it was mentioned that the shore has eroded, so it's actually a few feet closer to the
Yeah,
house than it had been. So that would be a consideration if the erosion's already occurring. Wouldn't you want to move back to prevent a whole rebuilding again in a few more years?
Well, they purchased it 5 years ago, and I think that erosion that's taken place was there at that time. I don't know if it's gotten any worse over the past 5 years, but that they certainly have the means to have that shoreline reinforced.
Their investment, yeah.
But, yeah, to protect their investment. But I think, getting back to the foundation, if I may, there isn't any portion of that existing foundation that's going to be demoed or ruined. I mean, it's in perfect shape. We're going to use every square inch of it, and then the only concrete work will be the new add-ons,
Yeah.
which are all in the conforming area.
One of the reasons that we're concerned is that the planning board, not this board, but there has been a situation where a house did get approval and they ended up taking the foundation out and
Oh, wow.
building back in the same place, so it was a tough
Yeah.
one. Yes, Howard.
So that gets us to the hat. And I wanted to just be really brief, because I know that we have a long meeting, but Margaret sent this inquiry to the state. The respondent was a fellow who is marine geologist, Maine Geological Survey for the Department of Agriculture and Conservation. He's the guy. And he writes that there are two hats. Because I always thought that the Portland tide level sets everything else.
Would you explain for people what the hat means?
The highest annual tide.
Yeah.
And you saw, well, for those of you who've seen the plans, there's a description of that. The 75 feet setback is from the highest annual tide line. Highest annual tide line. The NOAA has two hats. The first hat's called the highest astronomical tide, and that is set in Portland, and everybody else reflects off of that. That is not the state writes to us, that is not the hat that we use for purposes of, the state uses for shoreline zoning, and therefore we use for shoreline zoning. We use the highest annual tide. And that's based on data that NOAA produces for various locations, not just Portland. For example, there are 6 locations or more in Harpswell, including Potts Point and others. And it's basically a tide prediction based on mean lower low water mark. We don't know what that is, but Mr. Slavinsky writes to us that these are all done on tide predictions, and they show that, for example, for Potts Harbor, the predicted highest annual tide will occur on October 18th, October 19th, and November 16th of this year. He then goes on to say that tide predictions, which is what this NOAA thing does, are running low due to the fact that they reference the mean sea level back in 1991. And that hasn't been updated, but it's scheduled to be updated in 2026. He also reports that since 1991, the sea level rise has been 0.4 feet. So if you look at the 1991 data and then you raise the sea level by 0.4 feet, the hat comes in. Some, we don't know how much. And it will depend on different places. And when I think the engineers set the, when you draw a plan and you go to an engineer to put the hat on the plan, they reference this NOAA data that goes back to 1991. He also said that current high sea levels push observable water levels above predictions. So we're running higher, but this, and that's what the result of the January and February storm was, pushing water into the Gulf of Maine. However, he said that storm surge is not included in this,
Right.
in this particular calculation.
Right.
So
The hat is still water level.
So, for example, the property that we visited for a tear down on Oars Island, that was just exactly 75 feet away, on whose lawn there were huge boulders caused by the storm surge. That's not a relevant factor in that determination, but the hat could be moved in 2 years to significantly change along our coastline.
And with
Probably
sea
will.
level rise, the highest annual tide line, annual, read annual, is a moving elevation as sea level rise occurs. For better or for worse, my favorite expression tonight, the ordinance reflects what the current highest annual tide is in the year that the property is permitted.
Absolutely.
And so there's no provision in shoreland zoning. There is, however, in the floodplain management provisions, that you have to, for instance, build to the base flood elevation plus 1 foot. That provides some things there. I would say, though, in terms of the application, the amount of property that is non-conforming in the existing building, if you build the new building on the same foundation, will be the same. Because if you measure the existing building from a place, and you measure the new building from the same place, the amount of encroachment comparing the existing building and the new building doesn't change.
No, I don't disagree with that, but I still think the fact that the sea level is rising and has already risen since the data, since the way it was calculated under the existing hat,
Absolutely.
is part of the definition of greatest practical extent that we have to consider. And that's where the factor comes in. That's why I wanted to discuss this, because not only is it important if you have enough land. So if we took the assumption that there is enough land to make this building conform, and we're still conforming to the existing hat, which we know is going to change in 2 years. It goes toward the question of greatest practical extent, I think. And I'm not suggesting we have the facts yet to determine that. I just think that You know, the issue is, there's a huge deck around the swimming pool. And that's not being changed. So how much of this other deck, if that other deck wasn't there, would that make it more conforming?
Yeah, I mean, this is what the planning board is increasingly being asked to deal with. We can see that there are issues coming in the future that are going to make it more difficult for property owners. And we want to protect the property owner, and we also want to protect the town.
Madam Chair, let Dan go first.
Yeah, I'm looking over the paper, and I wish I could have been on that site.
I do too.
But my monthly shot. I'm looking for anything that shows that it is not reasonably possible to make this conforming. All I'm seeing is that, well, there's an existing foundation, therefore we ought to be able to build on that, rather than saying, with a reconstruction, is it possible, and is reasonably possible on this property to make the entire thing conforming?
I don't think so. No, not without moving the building back.
No, that's exactly
No,
what Dan
I'm
is
saying, but-
suggesting. Yeah.
Yeah, forget about the existing foundation for a moment. Is it possible to put this proposed reconstruction conforming?
To
And I think that's one of
redesign
the
it.
things we have to ask, is that whether this property the reconstruction can be done in a way to make it more conforming or fully conforming.
Thank you, Dan. Planner.
Somewhere in the application, I believe it says that the replacement structure will utilize the existing foundation and some of the first floor walls. Is that correct?
Yes, the ground floor walls.
That's,
Tell me what you mean by the ground floor walls.
The westerly side of the foundation, which is the water side, goes right out to daylight, full height.
Yep.
Then there's walls all the way around that. The rest of the foundation is 4 feet, 4 feet tall with daylight wall on top of that. So we intended to reuse those walls.
So everything up to the floor structure will be retained. This is
Yes.
just not a footer that we're talking
That's right,
about.
that's right.
We're talking about a cast-in-place concrete wall with wood frame wall on the water side?
Yeah.
but
Getting
that
back
still
to,
doesn't answer
getting
my
back to
question.
what Dan said, if the total footprint can be relocated so that it conforms, then you can't change it without meeting the setback, full setback requirements. That's
If-
what the section says.
That's correct.
And we don't have that information. And in order to make that determination, forget about greatest extent, because if that, I think, trumps it, that section about if you could have enough land.
The applicant, I would say, has the responsibility to
Show.
demonstrate to the board that the amount of footprint can't be, I'm gonna call it logically constructed on the lot, taking into account the slope of the land, existing septic and well and all of those things. And the burden of proof is on the applicant to say that at first level, that you can't relocate the entire area. And actually, if you look at the plot plan on A9, the applicant has essentially shown what we might call the developable area inside the red line. That is the area that meets the shoreland setback and the property line setbacks. It's there. And so the first question is, could you build the building with this amount of space so that it is entirely located within that developable area? And then the second threshold question is, and if you can't do that and the building's still going to be non-conforming, is the proposed reconstruction, given those factors, the best you can do in terms of meeting the setback
Yeah.
requirements?
Yes.
Okay, so,
May I respond?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
We've removed about 198 square feet of deck that was non-conforming. So we did that. We could redesign it and lose that, just that 4-foot walkway that leads to a stairway. That's their second egress out of the main floor. And I could cut back the deck off of the kitchen, which just the corner of it is in non-conforming. It juts out 4 feet from that front corner on the westerly side, about midway down. That being said, that's quite a lot. I think the other part of your question is you're asking, should we force the homeowner to demo a perfectly usable foundation, perfectly good foundation, which I looked into the costs of that, demoing it, moving it back, digging, probably blasting, or at least chipping substantially, was about a $160,000 bill. So that's what that would add.
It would add 160, but what is the total cost of the reconstruction?
I'm not the builder, so I think it's probably in the $2 million range.
Yeah,
I
I think
understand.
someplace in the application it says
Yeah,
2.5
my understanding
million.
was 3 million.
I guess I look at it that the threshold question is, could it be done?
Yes, I think it can.
And the
Then the
issue,
que-
and then the issue is, for us, if it can be done, the statute sort of ties our hands a little.
Yeah.
And if there are good and valid reasons, like, and we've done this before, that, well, the septic's behind there, or there isn't enough land without violating a sideline or another setback, then I think it gets us to the next inquiry, which is the greatest practical extent. And all of the issues that you raise, including the cost factor, come in on that one, as opposed to the just basic, can it be done?
So what I'm hearing from the board is that the board would like to have more information with regard to the potential to reduce the shoreline setback nonconformity.
Yeah.
More information from the applicant. And so Mark has done, I think, a great job of preparing findings that would allow us to table this and ask for more information. And so, if anybody, is there any further discussion, Mark?
Let me amend my suggestion.
Okay.
I think the first suggestion is that the applicant meet with staff after having looked at the site and evaluated whether they think the building could be constructed completely within the footprint. That's the threshold test, and Howard's nodding his head. If the answer to that is yes, it can be, then the rest of it is a moot point, because the ordinance doesn't say should, The ordinance says shall, that the planning board, the town, cannot approve the reconstruction of a non-conforming structure that remains non-conforming if it can be reconstructed in a way that's conforming, meets all of the requirements.
And I assume that's in the state shoreline zone act as well.
That's well, it's in the
Similar.
shoreland zoning guidelines.
Guidelines.
There is no, but to me, and I think the test on that is there a level of reasonableness. If it's the side of a cliff, if the only spot that you can put a septic system is certain places.
Well, or whatever.
And I think doing that exercise is the precursor. Much of the same information is needed to do that. But I think that's the test, that the applicant has to be able to convince the staff that, yes, it's not possible to reconstruct a building that meets all of the setback requirements as required by the ordinance.
Okay, I have a question about that new suggestion, because one of the things I liked about your other suggestion was that it gave the board actual information from which the board could see and make its own determination, which would be an accurate site plan that shows the location of existing and proposed structures, the location of the sewage disposal system and the water system, the location of the driveway, the location of mature trees, and the topography of the entire lot at 2-foot contour levels, and an analysis of how the proposed replacement structure is in compliance with the setback requirements to the greatest practical extent given the prior considerations. What I like about that is that it gives the planning board information and documentation to work from, rather than having the staff meet with the applicant, say, well, it looks like X or it looks like
Well,
Y,
I'm
and
hoping-
then come back to the board.
I'm hoping that the applicant is astute enough to understand that when they address the issue of that, can the structure be located in a way that's conforming, that they're going to provide all of that information without us having to ask for it.
Okay, I'm going to, ready to make a motion if the board is ready for a motion to be made and if there's no further
I just wanted to ask, are there any abutters here?
Good question.
Are there any people that want to talk that live in that neighborhood? No?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to move that the planning board table taking jurisdiction for the review of the application of Carl and Stephanie Nicholas to reconstruct a non-conforming structure on Lot 36 on map 22 that will continue to be non-conforming with respect to required shoreline setback until the applicant provides the following information for staff review: an analysis of the condition of existing foundation and its suitability for use for the proposed reconstruction and the extent of work needed to use the existing foundation for this project, an accurate scaled site plan that shows the location of the existing and proposed structures on the lot, the location of the sewage disposal system and water supply system, the location of the driveway, the location of any mature trees, and the topography of the entire lot at 2-foot contour intervals, and an analysis of how the proposed replacement structure is in compliance with the setback requirements to the greatest practical extent, given the prior considerations. I move also that the applicant, once this information is submitted to the staff, that the applicant meet with staff based on this information to determine if the redevelopment can meet the setback requirements, and that the staff report back to the planning board with this information at its earliest convenience.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, so moved, and take a vote. All in favor? Thank you.
Well, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
consideration. We'll be back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was gonna ask you about this. It's not only a two-bedroom.
I know, isn't that amazing? You're gonna build a $2 million.
All right.
I don't understand that.
Does anybody need to take a break?
We only have one more, don't we?
Yeah, just wondering if anyone wants to take a bathroom break. Okay? No? Okay. All right, let's move on to item 5. This is creative carpentry. Is the applicant for the owners Pam Ballinger and John Henshaw, map 16, lot 416 at 25 Stover's Ocean Avenue. This is another consideration for the board's exercising jurisdiction for the review of an application to reconstruct a non-conforming structure. Most of us were able to attend the site plan review. It was fairly simple, attend the site walk, and it was fairly simple, but informative. This is much simpler, I think, than our last application, but I'd still like to ask the planner to give the board some background on this.
I'm going to take you to the second sheet in the drawing set, or maybe it's the first one that's stapled together, C1, where there is a site plan. The proposal is much like the previous one, a request to remove the existing structure and replace it. In that drawing, you can see in the crosshatched area the proposed structure and patio areas, and you can see the proposed construction. The 75-foot offset from the highest annual tide line is shown in there in a red dotted line. The existing
Is this it?
I don't see a
side
red
of the,
dotted line.
Is there a red dotted line? Where would
Well,
that be?
it's right here.
Hidden transfer in red, it's just black.
Oh,
not red.
so-
I'm sorry, I got color version, sorry. It goes through the,
Proposed deck and things?
yeah,
Oh,
Okay.
okay,
Right
so
through
it's the
there.
dotted line, okay.
and the existing
Okay.
structure encroaches into the 75-foot setback. The proposed reconstruction, as I understand it, would put the house, again, the structure portion, behind the 75-foot setback line, and the proposed deck would still encroach on the 75-foot setback.
Mark, does any of the house encroach on the setback, or is it just the deck?
My understanding is that, is somebody here representing the
Sir.
applicant? My understanding is the entire structure of the house is essentially behind the 75-foot setback line,
Yeah, that's
correct?
correct, yeah. The deck,
So the only thing that encroaches on the, into the setback is that deck out front,
yeah.
and the stairs leading down from the deck or up to the deck.
Okay.
And it's difficult to see, and I'm sorry, your name is?
Luc Cellier,
Say again?
Luc Cellier,
And you represent,
John and Pam,
yeah, but you're the builder?
owner of, yeah, I'm the owner of Creative Carpentry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the site plan that I'm looking at, I think there may be a more recent one, located behind the house, there's a tree with a rectangle around it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That depicts the location of the existing septic system?
It says leach field here, so.
There's a leach field that's up about 22 feet above the
Yeah, that
existing
says
house,
leach field.
in the middle of the lawn.
Right.
Not sure.
Right, behind the house.
Yes.
Yes,
And then those
going up the hill.
septic is
Correct,
next
yeah.
to it.
And then further up the hill, there's two more little rectangles that say 12 and a half feet by whatever, and I think that's a
there's a
a
shed,
shed and a deck there.
Yeah.
That are existing buildings.
correct.
And so there's no proposal to do anything with the existing septic system?
The new house, the proposed location would bring it up the hill within 8 feet of the current septic.
Yep.
So we're having a designer take 2 of the lower rows and put them to the top of the septic field, right up to the driveway. So we're even pushing it further in order to give us a little bit of room so we don't have to get a state variance.
Okay, I want you to say that.
Yeah, yeah, we're pretty trapped.
Yeah. And so the situation before the board, once again, is this is the reconstruction of a non-conforming structure. And the new structure will continue to be non-conforming. The first issue for you is, do you want to take jurisdiction for the review? Or do you want to remand it to codes to process the application?
Okay, let's take any questions from the planning board to the applicant's representative. Howard?
I can't tell from this on the plans, but the proposed deck, the area of the proposed deck within the hat, within the 75 feet, do we
Yes.
have a calculation?
63 feet.
No, I know the depth, but the area of the deck that's non-conforming.
Oh, I don't have that calculation with me,
Okay.
yeah.
So my thought is that if it's greater than 825 square feet, which is the amount of the original cottage that was in the setback area, then you are increasing the nonconformity,
Yes.
and that would not be permissible.
Mr. Chairman,
Let the planner tell me.
can you write down the following?
He's not the chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Howard,
I don't want to be
Howard,
either.
Not
can you
yet.
write down the following numbers?
Yeah,
Yeah,
The deck appears on this plan
Here's the deck.
to be 30, 31, 35, 36 feet long by just under 12 feet wide.
Okay.
My mathematics says that's about 422 square feet. Is that correct?
I'm gonna multiply.
432.
432.
432.
Yeah.
Sorry, my brain's a little tired tonight. And then there's the landing and the stairway that goes down. So not all of the deck, I don't believe, is non-conforming. So the total amount of the deck and stairway is in the range of 500 square feet, of which only probably 90% or so, it looks like on here, would be non-conforming.
90% of the 500 square feet.
well, why does it look bigger than on the first page than the footprint of the old building, the existing building? That was non-conforming.
It does look bigger.
Because the existing building is more of a square than a rectangle.
Yeah, but it just doesn't look right.
It is
I
hard
think-
to read. It is hard to read.
Is there a deck there now currently?
There is not a deck there currently.
Okay.
Can the deck be put in a different position?
There's really no room on either side. We're really pinched in on the side setbacks. We certainly could reconfigure that staircase, but we take,
14 by 24.
if we put it off to the side and wound it around a little bit.
This seems like it's a huge.
No, Mark, this shows, this is the existing,
I can't read it.
well, I think though it shows
What's the number on the?
14 by
plan?
24.
S1, S1.
Okay, 24 long and then 14.
14.
Okay,
That would have been the existing building.
I think I see what you're talking about.
But 14 times, so what's that measurement?
14 by what?
24 is less. It's smaller. It looks smaller.
336.
Yeah.
Yeah.
336, and it's increasing to about 500 mark. So from the original site plan showing where the hat is, the 75-foot line, it shows an area that's 14 by 24 feet, or 336 feet existing, and it's now going to go up to, as you calculated, about 500.
Well,
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why I said 47%
that would
increase.
be, you're right.
understand that there is existing non-conforming space
That's what he said.
under the existing deck. I mean, under the proposed deck.
Only a little bit, though. I mean, just a sliver, a couple, I mean,
And I wasn't even considered, well, if you include 500
I
as
mean,
the
I'm-
staircase.
I'm going to ask the applicant, my understanding of C1 says the area of non-conforming footprint is 825 square feet.
I think that's the overall square footage
Of
of
the
the cottage,
cottage, the whole cottage.
the whole cottage.
Oh, okay. That makes a difference.
Oh, okay.
So the question is whether the proposed deck is more, contains more non-conforming area than the existing house.
It's allowed to be 30% larger. The footprint is allowed to be 30% larger. Back row, code enforcement office. Yeah.
but this is not. It's
So
more than that.
the amount of non-conforming footprint can be increased by 30% under the ordinance. It can't be closer to the water.
It looks like it, the staircase moves it closer to the water.
It does.
I guess
It's hard
I
to
just
tell.
say what I said on the previous applicant. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong as the newest member of the planning board, but this is
That
a
would be 436.
non-necessary structure, you know, in a non-conforming area. I think it's setting precedent, again, you know, it's not, you don't need a deck, you know, to live in the house. And I think if we eliminated the deck, it would pretty much be completely conforming.
I think the problem is that we don't have the numbers. You may be right, Mark may be right, that it's within the 130 that you would allow you to do it, but I think what we need to know is what is the hatched area, what's the area of the existing building that is non-conforming? And how much of the deck, what's the size of the new deck that's non-conforming?
Sure. And you'd
And
like
if
to
we
see
had
that,
those,
yeah.
and it's not even we, I think we could remand this with.
With that information.
And ask that they determine that information and that the deck can't be larger than the nonconformity of the deck shouldn't be larger than the existing nonconformity.
I think we can do that too.
Yeah.
I do think, you know, of course, you're going to need to draw new plans because we have to have plans on the record that show what's on the ground. How does the board feel about doing that, about remanding it to codes with Howard's suggestion
It
that?
would help to have that information.
Yeah, it would. I
Would
think
you
so.
rather have that, would you rather table it and have that information brought back to the board? Or you?
I'd
okay.
rather table it and have it
Yeah.
come back. That way we can make a solid decision.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
I
okay.
think so too.
And just a question, are you allowing us to do the 30% increase of the nonconformity? Or
The
are we-
ordinance allows that.
So the deck can be 30% more than
Well,
the existing structure that's within?
Well, the answer is not, it doesn't apply to the deck. It applies to the amount of existing non-conforming footprint. And the proposed amount of non-conforming footprint can't be more than 30% larger than the existing. And whether it's the deck or the stairs or whatever, it's how much footprint is currently non-conforming times 1.3 is the maximum amount of footprint that can be non-conforming with the proposed.
Okay.
And I agree with that, except one point. It's 130% from 1989 structure.
That's correct.
Right.
And therefore, if someone has already used the 30%, they can't use it again.
Yes.
You're absolutely correct,
Yeah.
and Margaret will go through and
They have
and
the
look
data
at
on that.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yep, good point.
Okay, anybody want to?
I just have one more question. I think it was implied, but it looks like with the location of the leach field and everything, that this does not look like a one that can be moved further back in order to make it.
That's correct,
Yeah.
yeah. We've put the house out of the 75-foot setback, and we're trapped with the leach field. We can't go back any further. Otherwise, we would and give ourselves that extra space.
I thought I heard
I
that.
think you may find you're very close to the
Very
square
close to it,
footage with
yeah.
the 130.
Yep.
Add, and otherwise you may have to
Shave
cut a
down.
corner off the.
Relocate
Madam
the stairs.
Chair?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
we-
writing
Your
down the
motion
motion.
to table,
Yes, yes,
technically, a motion to table
Yes.
is not debatable, but
okay.
I mean, it seems to me with what Dan just said, if the board is comfortable with essentially the location and design of the project, and the only question is whether the proposed plan meets the limit on increase in footprint, I'm not sure I understand why that needs to come back to the planning board, and it's simply a staff, bring it in and show us the existing footprint and the proposed footprint, and if it meets it, it meets it, and if it doesn't, you gotta go back and redesign it.
Yep, and I was asking the board that question. Lori seems to feel that she'd like to see it again. Do you still feel that way?
I mean, I'll defer to, there's a lot of good brains in here, so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good brains
Yeah.
in here that, so if everybody else feels we can manage it the other way, then I'll go along.
Okay. How do other
I have to
people
say that I am, they have done, Codes has done a great job on these 4 applications.
Yeah.
And I'm really complimentary of everything that Margaret and Tim do on these things. And the time that they spend, they will find a solution for this.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Do I understand that
Agree.
to be a suggestion that the motion to table be withdrawn and there be a motion?
There really wasn't a motion to
remand?
table really formally.
Okay.
So I move that we remand this application to the codes office and to staff, and that they determine more accurately what amount of square footage is allowed for the proposed deck, so long as it meets the limit on the 30% expansion of the footprint.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good job. All right. I can't believe that we did that.
I know.
We have,
We have several other things.
you know,
but these are the
do
easy
you know why we did that so
Right.
quickly?
Why is that?
Because,
we're all-
because the codes office did a really good
Learned it
job,
as it
and the
goes.
planner did a really good
Yeah, I'm
job
not trying to
getting
guess.
us finding.
Margaret told me there's 4 more coming next month.
I'm all
Three.
Wait, you have a line of communication with Margaret and the state, you know, that I don't know about, that maybe you should share with us?
Wait,
Candy lady.
We're not done yet,
let's-
are we?
We have other business, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Not
all right,
free
I'm
yet.
I'm looking for my
Right here.
Oh, thank you. Okay, other business, item 4, consideration of minutes from May 15th and May 22nd meetings. I will admit I have not read them.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're good?
I read
Okay. Any want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of May 15 and May 23.
Any second?
I second.
Okay, second. Christine, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. Planners update, Mitchell Field boat launch.
That's for you.
I don't know what you want me to update you on, other than
Well,
the town, as part of the consideration of moving forward on the final design of the boat launch,
You're welcome.
ask GEI to update the cost estimate. The cost estimate for the boat launch as currently designed went from about $900,000 to 1.7 to $2.1 million, depending upon whether we have to pay in lieu of wetland impact fees and what exactly gets included in it. The select board met the other night to consider the situation. And my understanding, since I wasn't at the meeting, but I think some of you may have been, is that they have asked that the proposal be finalized and that an item go to a special town meeting at the November election to ask the town whether it wants to raise the additional funding, and in the meantime, to look for other funding.
I was hoping you could give them an update on the turning radius, because that was the
Oh,
big
yeah.
discussion.
Oh, all right, well.
At the last,
Yeah,
at the last planning
and there
board
was
meeting.
discussion with GEI that it's possible to wiggle a little here and wiggle a little there and increase the radius of the turning circle. There are some compromises that would have to be made within the existing design, most notably in terms of the raised pedestrian way on the south side of the causeway would have to be reduced to at grade where a hauler could drive over that and to push it out on the other side. So I think Dan Bannon from GEI thinks it's doable and can be accommodated without any significant changes in the cost, or those changes are sort of able to be accommodated within the increased budget figure.
Okay, thank you. I see somebody's really needs to
Fish.
get moving, needs to go fishing or something.
Oh, no, wait,
Anyway.
don't leave yet, Matt.
It's not me, it's Dan.
Dan.
I've fished all
Okay,
day.
I move we
All right.
adjourn.
You fished all day, I
No,
fished all
no,
night.
no,
We're adjourned.
no,
Oh,
Madam Chair,
no, I'm
don't adjourn yet.
Okay.
As you know, the town meeting adopted the updated floodplain management ordinance. That floodplain management ordinance includes the new FEMA flood insurance rate maps as amended by the town's request for a letter of map revision that changes the elevation based on the work the town had done. What that means is a very important thing, is that a significant amount of the shoreline in Harpswell will be put into AV zone. under the shoreland zoning ordinance, the land that's undeveloped within the shoreland zone that's in a V zone has to be zoned resource protection.
Oh, boy.
So in answer to kind of Dan's question about highest annual tide, the DEP gave us sort of a pass 2 years ago on amendments that said that when the new when the new floodplain maps became effective, they would expect that the town would revise its ordinance and depict the new resource protection areas on the zoning map. That responsibility will probably fall to the planning board. My going out the door recommendation is that you don't do that blindly, but that with staff assistance, you go through sort of lot by lot and say, where does it make sense to have RP, where don't you need to have RP? And that becomes sort of a negotiation with DEP staff, because they kind of say, no, they don't kind of say, they say, if it's an already developed area, you don't have to make it RP, but there's no real definition of what that is. So that's going to be a project that you will probably need to undertake to submit to the March town meeting next year.
Okay.
That will probably be a significant commitment on everybody's time and effort to do that.
You make
Howard's
sure you
looking-
tell the new person that on your way
Huh?
out the door.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, this is, we've known this, and we, you know, there are some procedural requirements about when you put land into a resource protection district, there has to be an individual notification process, and so going through and saying what area is within the new V zones and how does that impact property is probably going to need to be done on a lot-by-lot basis and understand there's only,
It's going to be more than that, though, because there will be new regulations for even developed lots that are in the V zone, so.
well, those already exist.
Yeah,
I mean,
but there will be new areas in the V zone that aren't there now.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so,
But that's all, in a sense, that's already happened. And so that's there, and that's going to be a significant project, particularly since if you look at the 5-foot by 3-foot map of the town, the amount of the resource protection district on the paper map is about the width of a pencil line.
Who does the GIS work for the town?
The answer is the town has normally farmed that out to Judy Colby George back when she was in a GIS business. Judy's got all of those, all the maps and all the plots of what the new floodplain areas are.
Mark, not to belabor this, but I think the planning board should encourage the select board to follow through on the recommendation that it pursue with the feds a review of that 200 square foot limit on lobster sheds and fishing shacks. It should, and I hope that the select board won't let that drop. I hope that they'll use every
Yeah, I mean,
resource
I
they
thought
have.
Christie said that at that meeting. Christie said that they were
Yeah,
going to do it.
I-
Yeah, I mean, You know,
I talked to
that's-
Christie last week, and at the public hearing, I almost got up at the public hearing and said, please don't forget to do this. And
Yeah.
Christie mentioned to me, she was surprised that no one got up at the public hearing to say that, and I was like, I felt like
mean,
I should have
that's-
gotten up, but
I
I
mean,
just
that
hope
could
they
be-
remember.
That can be pursued, and, you know, it's the same actors that have
Yeah.
been involved before.
Yeah, because I would hate to see the board have to turn somebody down for reconstruction of something that got damaged because we don't have the authority to do that. That would be a real shame. So I hope we can avoid that by contacting our legislative liaisons.
I'm just going to make a comment, sort of off the record, is that provision has been in the ordinance since 2003.
Yes,
The
we
town-
know that, Mark, but the
No,
weather has
I'm
not
just-
been in effect since 2003. It's
I'm sorry,
changing.
what?
The weather's changing.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And so we have to approach that issue, from my perspective, carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Because FEMA regularly audits compliance with the floodplain management
I see what you're saying.
regulations. Christie has told me that the last time they did an audit, they identified something like 50 or 60 permits that had been issued that didn't conform to the floodplain
Okay.
management
I-
requirements.
Okay, now I hear you. Damned if you do and damned if you
Well,
don't.
Well, I'm just,
What happens by that review is they raise the rates.
and they made people go back and redo things to conform to the requirements. All as I'm saying is we need to be careful that we're poking the stick,
Poking the bear.
you got it,
I get
in there as you do that.
Yes, thank you. that you're-
All right?
I hadn't thought of that, but I appreciate your saying that.
Yeah.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.